Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
For generations, Gone with the Wind has been remembered as one of the most beautiful and powerful films ever made. A sweeping love story set against the ruins of the Old South. But few know the truth about what happened behind the scenes. Beneath the glamour and the glory was a world of hidden turmoil. Every frame of this legendary movie hides a secret, and the reality behind its creation is far darker than anyone imagined. What you're about to discover will forever change the way you see Hollywood's most celebrated masterpiece, the woman behind the epic. The year was 1900, and Atlanta, Georgia, was still haunted by memories of the Civil War. From the ashes of that Old South, a young girl was born, Margaret Mitchell. Her childhood was filled with stories of battlefields and burned cities, told by relatives who had lived through it. These stories sank deep into her heart, shaping her imagination and, one day, the world's most famous Southern epic. Margaret was curious, bright, and rebellious. She devoured books and dreamed of becoming a writer, even when polite society expected her to marry well and stay quiet. After attending college, she joined the Atlanta Journal Sunday magazine as a journalist, a bold move for a woman in the 1920s. She wrote about strong, complicated women, often drawn from her own fire and wit. Yet behind her confidence was a private side that only a few would ever glimpse. A freak accident changed everything. In the mid-1920s, she injured her ankle and was confined to her home. Restless and unable to walk, she turned to the one thing that had always given her comfort: writing. Her husband, John Marsh, brought her stacks of history books to pass the time. But Margaret had something more ambitious in mind. She wanted to bring the South she had heard about as a child back to life. Sitting at a small wooden desk in her apartment, she began to write what she called the story of a girl who had lived through the war and lost everything. That girl would become Scarlett O'Hara. What started as a private escape became an obsession. For more than 10 years, Margaret poured her heart into her manuscript, revising, rewriting, and guarding it like a secret. Not even her friends knew what she was working on. By 1935, the secret was too big to hide. When an editor from Macmillan visited Atlanta, a friend casually mentioned that Margaret had written a novel. Reluctantly, she handed over a rough draft, thick, messy, and incomplete. Soon after, panic struck her. She telegrammed the publisher, begging them to send it back. But it was too late. An editor had already started reading, and the verdict was clear. It was extraordinary. In 1936, Gone with the Wind was published. It became an instant phenomenon. Readers were drawn into its sweeping romance, its tragedy, and its unforgettable heroine. Within 6 months, it sold more than 1 million copies. By the next year, it had won the Pulitzer Prize for fiction. Suddenly, the quiet woman from Atlanta was one of the most famous authors in America. But fame came with a price. Critics debated whether her book glorified a painful past. The novel's portrayal of slavery and the Old South stirred controversy, even as fans adored it. Still, nothing could stop the storm of success. Hollywood came calling, eager to transform the novel into a motion picture like nothing the world had ever seen. Margaret, shy and private, preferred to stay away from the spotlight. She sold the film rights, but refused to be involved in the adaptation. She once said she was flattered, but the film belonged to the studio now, not to her. Her job was done, or so she thought, because in Hollywood, the story was only just beginning. The woman who had written quietly in her apartment had unknowingly handed her story to a man whose obsession would turn the dream into a living nightmare for everyone on set. As the cameras prepared to roll, a storm of pressure, addiction, and control was about to engulf Hollywood's most ambitious project. The producer's gamble. In 1936, David O. Selznick purchased the film rights of this novel for $50,000. It was the highest amount ever paid for a novel at that time. Many in the industry thought he had lost his mind. Making a film set during the Civil War was a financial risk. The cost of sets, costumes, and large-scale battle scenes would be enormous. Selznick's own father-in-law, Louis B. Mayer of MGM, warned him that the film might ruin his career. But Selznick saw something in Mitchell's Adipert story that others didn't. He believed it could become the defining movie of his generation. From the very beginning, he was obsessed with getting every detail right. He wanted the movie to look grand and feel real. He studied Civil War photographs, read letters from soldiers, and brought in experts to ensure authenticity in every scene. He planned to shoot in Technicolor, which was still new and expensive, but he believed that the South's landscapes and costumes would be even more breathtaking in color. Selznick's drive to make the perfect film soon became the talk of Hollywood. He worked long hours, often sleeping at his studio. He wrote countless memos to his team, detailing everything from costume fabrics to dialogue changes. He was known to send notes so long that secretaries joked he spent more time writing memos than producing. But beneath his determination, he was beginning to feel the weight of the expectations pressing down on him. He knew that millions were waiting to see how he would bring the famous novel to life. Fans had imagined their own Scarlett O'Hara and Rhett Butler, and whoever he cast would be compared to those imagined figures. This pressure made him indecisive. Months went by without a confirmed cast. The search for Scarlett became one of the biggest publicity campaigns in Hollywood history. More than 1,000 women auditioned, but none seemed to capture the mix of strength and charm that Mitchell had written. As Selznick juggled auditions and rewrites, the project's costs kept rising. The stress was relentless. He often complained of sleepless nights and exhaustion, but he refused to slow down. His perfectionism began to take a toll on his health, and the people around him started to notice changes in his behavior. He seemed more irritable, more restless, and more controlling with every passing week. To keep himself going, Selznick turned to something that would soon take control of him. He could work all night without feeling tired, but the longer he used it, the more unstable he became. His confidence turned into paranoia, his energy into obsession. Even as his behavior became erratic, Selznick's determination never wavered. He believed that if he pushed hard enough, the result would be extraordinary. He had already invested more time and money than any other producer dared to. Now, there was no turning back. But what no one realized was that the same energy driving him toward greatness was also pushing him toward disaster. The substance-fueled confidence that made him fearless would soon turn the set into a place of tension, fear, and endless exhaustion. Fueled by speed, amphetamines were not unusual in Hollywood during the 1930s. Many actors and studio workers used them to stay awake for long hours under hot studio lights. For Selznick, they began as a way to fight exhaustion. Soon, however, they became something he could not live without. He took them daily, sometimes by the handful, just to maintain his energy. Actress Evelyn Keyes, who played Sue Ellen O'Hara, once said Selznick took pills like popcorn. What began as a tool to help him cope with stress quickly turned into a dangerous addiction that affected every decision he made on set. The change was visible. Selznick started speaking faster, thinking faster, and demanding more from everyone around him. He would suddenly call late-night meetings or order retakes in the middle of the night. Crews often worked until sunrise, only to be told to reshoot scenes the next day. He wanted control over everything: lighting, costumes, dialogue, even how each line should sound. His energy seemed endless, but it was unnatural, and it came at the expense of everyone's sanity. Actors began to dread his unpredictable moods. One moment, he would praise a scene as brilliant, and the next, He would order it to be shot again because he felt it wasn't perfect enough. Camera operators complained of exhaustion, and costume designers struggled to keep up with his constant demands for adjustments. The set became a place of chaos, where no one knew when their workday would end. Many who worked under Selznick later said the production felt like a marathon with no finish line. The longer this continued, the more Selznick's health began to deteriorate. His mind was sharp but restless, and his body was showing signs of strain. He lost weight, his temper grew short, and his face looked pale and drawn. Yet he refused to slow down. He believed that the movie's success depended entirely on his control. "If I let go for even one moment," he told a friend, "this whole thing could collapse." His words revealed a deeper truth. Selznick's greatest fear was losing the power he had worked so hard to gain. Despite the growing tension, the film's progress continued. Sets were being built, scenes were being shot, and the grand vision was slowly taking shape. But every new development also brought new arguments. The crew began to whisper about the producer's erratic behavior and his obsession with perfection. Directors and assistant producers tried to reason with him, but he rarely listened. His judgment was clouded by the substance that made him feel unstoppable. What no one knew at the time was that Selznick's erratic decisions would soon lead to one of the biggest shakeups in Hollywood history. The production was already struggling with time and money, and the tension between Selznick and the film's first director was reaching a breaking point. Their disagreements were constant. Selznick criticized the pacing, the lighting, and even the tone of the performances. The director, in turn, accused Selznick of interference and chaos. After weeks of conflict, he made the bold decision, which was a shocking move that sent waves through the studio. The director who vanished when production on Gone with the Wind began, the man chosen to direct it, was George Cukor, one of the most respected filmmakers of his time. Cukor had built a strong reputation for drawing emotional depth from his actors, especially women. Many believed he was the perfect choice to guide Scarlett O'Hara's story with sensitivity and grace. But what started as a promising partnership between Cukor and producer David O. Selznick soon spiraled into one of the most talked-about conflicts in Hollywood history. From the first week on set, there was tension. Selznick, driven by his growing obsession with control, found it impossible to let the director work independently. He often interrupted filming to give his own notes, sometimes contradicting Cukor's directions right in front of the cast. Cukor, calm but proud, resented this interference. The constant back and forth slowed production, and the crew could sense the unease spreading through the studio. Selznick accused Cukor of being too slow, too careful, too focused on the emotional aspects of scenes rather than the spectacle. He wanted big visuals, grand moments, and constant energy. Cukor, however, was more interested in character detail and subtle performances. Their visions of the film were completely different. The result was a creative tug-of-war that drained everyone's patience. But creative differences weren't the only issue. Behind the scenes, whispers began to spread about something else, something more personal. George Cukor was openly gay at a time when Hollywood still forced many to hide their identity. It was an open secret in the industry, but not everyone was tolerant. Clark Gable, the actor playing Rhett Butler, was rumored to be uncomfortable working with Cukor. Some claimed that Gable even pressured Selznick to remove him from the production. Though no one ever confirmed this, the rumor persisted for years. Selznick finally made his decision. Just weeks into production, he called Cukor into his office and dismissed him. The official reason was that the director worked too slowly and failed to meet the studio's demands. But those close to the project believed otherwise. They felt it was a decision born from ego and prejudice rather than artistic differences. Hollywood insiders were stunned. Cukor had been one of the industry's brightest talents, and suddenly he was gone. After Cukor's removal, Victor Fleming was brought in to replace him. Fleming had recently directed The Wizard of Oz and was known for his efficiency and ability to handle large productions. He was seen as a man who could take control of the chaos that Gone with the Wind had become. Yet Fleming's arrival didn't solve everything. The actors, particularly Vivien Leigh and Olivia de Havilland, had grown close to Cukor. They often continued to seek his guidance in secret, meeting him privately to discuss their performances even after he was fired. Cukor's influence never truly disappeared. His early direction helped shape the emotional foundation of the film. Many of the most intimate scenes between Scarlett and the other characters retained his touch, even though his name was erased from the credits. In a way, Gone with the Wind became a combination of two visions: Cukor's emotional subtlety and Fleming's grand visual flair. Meanwhile, Selznick was relieved to have someone who followed his orders without constant argument. While the crew tried to recover from Cukor's sudden departure, another cast member found herself carrying the weight of the entire film on her shoulders. Her role demanded emotional range, stamina, and precision, and every mistake meant starting over. It was an experience that would shape her forever. Let's tell you how the immense personal toll that playing one of cinema's most iconic characters took on her. The struggle of Vivien Leigh. When the search for Scarlett O'Hara began, it became one of the most famous casting hunts in Hollywood history. Over 1,000 women auditioned for the part, each hoping to capture the fiery spirit of the South's most unforgettable heroine. But no one seemed to fit the role perfectly. The character needed to be strong yet vulnerable, charming yet ruthless. Selznick grew frustrated, convinced that no actress could truly embody Scarlett. Then came Vivien Leigh, a British stage actress with striking beauty and undeniable charisma. She was introduced to Selznick in a dramatic fashion. During the filming of the Burning of Atlanta scene, Leigh's agent brought her to the set and presented her with a confident smile. "Here's your Scarlett O'Hara," he announced. At that moment, amid the blazing lights and swirling smoke, Selznick finally believed he had found his star. Leigh's journey to the role was far from easy. She was an outsider in Hollywood, British, unfamiliar with the Southern accent, and relatively unknown in America. Many fans of the novel were outraged that a non-American actress had been chosen to represent their beloved Scarlett. The Daughters of the Confederacy, a powerful cultural group, even tried to convince Selznick to recast the role. But the producer stood by his choice, insisting that Vivien Leigh had the right combination of grace and fire. From her first day on set, Leigh gave everything she had to the performance. She studied Southern speech patterns, worked closely with dialect coaches, and practiced every scene until her movements felt natural. Her dedication impressed everyone, but it came with a heavy cost. The production schedule was brutal. Long hours under the studio lights left her exhausted. She was required to wear tightly laced corsets that made breathing difficult, and the hot costumes caused her constant discomfort. Behind her calm professionalism, Leigh was fighting a private battle. She had been struggling with bipolar disorder, though it was not widely understood at the time. Her mood often swung from intense energy to deep sadness. The endless pressure of the film only made these shifts worse. Some days, she arrived on set cheerful and full of life, and on others, she seemed withdrawn and fragile. Despite her struggles, she never allowed her illness to interfere with her work. She believed she had to prove herself worthy of the role that so many doubted she could play. Selznick, however, showed little sympathy for her emotional or physical exhaustion. His obsession with perfection meant that no scene was ever good enough. He often demanded dozens of takes, sometimes for the smallest expressions. He even instructed wardrobe designers to use adhesive tape to emphasize her figure, adding to her discomfort. The pressure on Leigh became unbearable. Yet, in front of the camera, she remained flawless. Her transformation into Scarlett O'Hara was complete. She captured the character's pride, charm, and stubbornness with extraordinary precision. When Scarlett swore that she would never go hungry again, audiences could feel every ounce of emotion behind her words. It was not just acting. It was a performance born of real struggle and determination. Leigh's co-star Clark Gable also had his moments of frustration. He was a Hollywood veteran who disliked the emotional direction given by some of the earlier scenes. Their working relationship was professional, but tense. Still, their on-screen chemistry was undeniable. Together, they created one of the most iconic pairings in film history. As filming dragged on, Leigh's physical and emotional exhaustion deepened. She confided to friends that she felt trapped by the demands of the role and the constant interference from Selznick. But quitting was never an option. She knew that Scarlett O'Hara could define her career, and she refused to let it slip away. When filming finally ended, Leigh was left drained but triumphant. She had delivered a performance that critics would later call one of the greatest in cinematic history. Yet, she was too tired to celebrate. The experience had pushed her to her limits, both as an actress and as a person. Just when the actors thought the hardest part was over, a new battle began, this time with the Hollywood censors. Let's reveal how one of the most famous lines in film history almost disappeared forever. Fighting the censors. By the time filming neared completion, Gone with the Wind had already become a legend in the making. Every scene had been shot with obsessive precision, every costume crafted to perfection. Yet, just as the cast and crew were preparing to celebrate, a new challenge appeared, one that could have changed the most iconic moment in movie history. At the heart of the issue was a single line. As Rhett Butler walks away from Scarlett O'Hara at the end of the film, he delivers one of the most famous parting words ever written. "Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn." It was powerful, emotional, and true to the novel. But in 1939, those 4 words created a storm. The Motion Picture Production Code, also known as the Hays Code, strictly prohibited the use of profanity in movies. Even mild words like damn or hell were considered unacceptable for public viewing. For David O. Selznick, removing the line was unthinkable. He believed it carried the entire emotional weight of the story. Rhett Butler's final words captured years of love, conflict, and heartbreak in one sentence. Without it, the film would lose its impact. Determined to keep it, Selznick began a long battle with the censors. He wrote letters, attended meetings, and argued his case again and again. His main point was that the word damn was not being used as profanity, but as part of a faithful adaptation of a best-selling novel. For months, the discussion dragged on, with no clear decision. At one point, Selznick even considered changing the line to, "Frankly, my dear, I just don't care." But he knew it didn't have the same power. Finally, after persistent lobbying, the censors relented. They agreed that the line could stay, but only if it was used in its original literary context and not repeated elsewhere in the film. It was a small victory, but one that made history. That single sentence became one of the most quoted lines in cinema, symbolizing both defiance and heartbreak. With the censors satisfied, Selznick turned his attention to the film's premiere. The date was set for December 15, 1939, in Atlanta, Georgia, the very heart of the Old South. The city was transformed into a celebration of the film's release. Parades filled the streets, Confederate flags waved, and thousands of fans gathered to catch a glimpse of the stars. It was one of the grandest premieres in Hollywood history. But beneath the glamour, a painful truth lingered. The film's African-American cast members, including Hattie McDaniel, who played Mammy, were not allowed to attend the premiere because of segregation laws. Georgia's strict Jim Crow policies barred them from staying in the same hotels or sitting in the same theaters as their white co-stars. It was a stark reminder that while Gone with the Wind celebrated Southern grandeur, the real South was still deeply divided. Even the movie itself faced criticism. Some praised it as a cinematic masterpiece, while others condemned it for its romanticized portrayal of slavery and the Confederacy. Many African American viewers felt the film ignored the harsh realities of history, presenting the antebellum South as a world of charm and loyalty rather than pain and injustice. Still, audiences around the country were captivated. The film became an instant success, breaking box office records and earning praise for its scale and emotional power. Newspapers called it the greatest movie ever made. Yet, for those who worked behind the scenes, the glory came with a mix of exhaustion and unease. The production had taken nearly 3 years, consumed enormous amounts of money, and pushed everyone involved to their limits. But one of the cast members, the woman who had played Mammy, was about to make history in a way that no one could ignore. When the Academy Awards ceremony was announced, Hattie McDaniel's performance earned her an Oscar nomination for Best Supporting Actress. It was the first time in history that a black performer had ever been nominated for an Academy Award. The night of the Oscars would mark both triumph and tragedy. Glory and disgrace. The Academy Awards of 1940 were a night of celebration, glamour, and anticipation. Gone with the Wind had already broken records at the box office and captured the hearts of millions. The film was nominated for 13 Oscars, and excitement buzzed through Hollywood's finest halls. Everyone expected it to dominate the evening. Yet, behind the elegant gowns, bright lights, and cheerful applause, there was a shadow that could not be ignored. Hattie McDaniel, who played Mammy, had made history even before the ceremony began. Her performance had earned her an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress, the first ever for an African-American performer. For many, her nomination represented hope, proof that talent could rise above barriers. But the reality of the time was far more complicated. The ceremony was held at the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles, a venue that did not allow black guests. David O. Selznick, understanding the importance of McDaniel's attendance, personally petitioned the hotel management to make an exception. They finally agreed, but even then, she was not allowed to sit with her co-stars. A small table was placed for her at the back of the room, far from the film's main cast. Clark Gable, who had grown close to McDaniel during filming, reportedly considered skipping the ceremony in protest, but she convinced him to go, saying that she wanted the night to remain about the film, not the insult. When McDaniel's name was announced as the winner, the audience erupted in applause. She rose, dressed in a beautiful blue gown, tears in her eyes, and made her way to the stage. Her voice trembled as she delivered her speech. "It has made me feel very, very humble. I sincerely hope I shall always be a credit to my race and to the motion picture industry." Her words were heartfelt, but they carried the weight of decades of struggle and inequality. While the audience applauded, the irony was impossible to ignore. Here was a woman being celebrated for her talent, yet still forced to sit apart because of the color of her skin. Even after her win, Hattie McDaniel continued to face limited opportunities. Hollywood still confined black actors to stereotypical roles, maids, servants, and background figures. Despite her historic achievement, McDaniel found herself typecast in similar parts for the rest of her career. She once famously said, "I'd rather play a maid than be one," a statement that reflected both her realism and her quiet resistance. The inequalities extended beyond race. The wage gap between the cast members was astonishing. Clark Gable, who portrayed Rhett Butler, was paid $125,000 for 71 days of work. Vivien Leigh, who carried the entire film as Scarlett O'Hara, worked nearly twice as long, 125 days, and earned only $25,000. The pay difference between her and Gable was massive, and for the African-American actors, it was even more extreme. Hattie McDaniel's salary was just a fraction of what her white co-stars received, despite her groundbreaking performance. Gone with the Wind won 8 Oscars that night, including Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Actress for Vivien Leigh. It was a moment of glory that cemented the film's place in cinematic history. Yet, as the applause faded and the golden statues were collected, many left the ceremony aware that the celebration had also exposed Hollywood's deepest flaws: inequality, prejudice, and a divided industry that mirrored the society around it. In the decades that followed, Gone with the Wind continued to be praised for its artistry and criticized for its portrayal of history. Its sweeping romance and visual grandeur made it a timeless classic. But its depiction of the Old South as a land of charm and nobility remains a painful reminder of how Hollywood once chose to remember the past. Some saw it as a masterpiece of storytelling, while others viewed it as a dangerous distortion that ignored the cruelty of slavery and the realities of racial injustice. Today, the film stands as both a triumph and a warning. It changed cinema forever, shaping the way movies were made and remembered. But it also revealed the cost of that greatness, a cost paid by those who worked behind the scenes, those who were silenced, and those whose talents were celebrated only within the limits set by an unequal system. The lights dimmed, the applause faded, and the legends of Gone with the Wind became part of Hollywood's myth. Yet decades later, its legacy continues to divide audiences and spark debate. A reminder that even the brightest glories often carry the darkest shadows. What are your thoughts on the untold truths behind Gone with the Wind? Share your opinions in the comments, and let us know which part of this story surprised you the most.